in a second.
After a while, you can't make any changes. You just let
Okay.
all the time.
Okay, we live? Great. Welcome. Welcome everybody to the Senate Democratic Caucus. It is Tuesday, the 11th of April, which is astonishing. Where is this year going? I'm Allison Clarkson, the Majority Leader for the Senate Democratic Caucus, which is a rocket caucus, and we're here today. We have a lot of great things to talk about. We're going to, and so first, to kick us off, I'd love to introduce you to one of a favorite person, David Biet, who runs the Eastern Regional Conference for the Council of State Governments. One of the reasons I love CSG and ERC in particular, Dick and I and Brian, or lots of us, Stephanie drove in the back, we're all big fans, is because they deal with our greatest trade partners. We have the 5 eastern provinces of Quebec that meet with us, along with all the states, New York, east down to Maryland, and then the territories. Is that right? Oh, and well, I think it's great to work regionally. I think I love our conferences because we deal specifically with a lot of the issues that I particularly am interested in. They set up the Justice Center, which has been a terrific resource for our judicial committees, and we do a lot on workforce development and economic development and trade. So without further, and they have some terrific leadership programs that I wanted to make sure everybody understood. And David's going to talk about them. They're here for 2 days. And so we welcome you, David Biet.
Well, thank you, Senator Clarkson. It's good to be here. It's good to see some familiar faces. And it's been 3 years since we've been here, so it's great to be back. So the Council of State Governments is a regionally based national organization. We have 4 different regions. And as Senator Clarkson said, looking at issues regionally can be very helpful. I was on the phone recently with my colleagues in the South talking about DEI efforts, and it was very important for them. And I said, well, it's very important for our region, though, 180 degrees in the other direction.
Yeah.
So we can take positions on things that otherwise other regions couldn't. We serve 3 branches of state government, and I'm actually going to be meeting with 2 of them here this week. Well, we were founded in the 1930s to share best practices among states. And I think those of you who have taken advantage of our services know, because I know you have huge staffs that can do a lot of work for you. Not really. Give us a call. We can help you. If we can't help you on the variety of issues that we do, we'll connect you with our research team and Lexington, Kentucky at headquarters. So we're an extension of your staff. We do have a leadership program that Senator Clarkson mentioned. Our Eastern Leadership Academy is in the fall, and I see Senator Chittenden, Representative Jerome back there who have done it. Senator Clarkson's done it. Great, 5 days in Philadelphia. We cover all the costs. You get yourself to Philadelphia, and it's really, really neat. We've got the National Toll Program, which is from all 4 regions of the country. And that's meets in Lexington in the summer as well. And again, get yourself to Lexington and everything else is taken care of.
And I think Jane has done it and Kitty has done it too, right?
Yeah.
And anybody else who's done toll?
I applied this year, just saying.
Okay, great.
Good.
Perfect.
Lexington, I'll have to apply.
Yeah. It's the deadline's May 15th.
I went in 1995.
She went when she was in the administration.
Anyway, we also have a program called East Train, where we bring some of our trainers to the State House. And I know we've been working with the leadership over the last couple of years to do that, but we bring it here. Again, we pay for it, we cover it. We've got meetings, as Senator Clarkson talked. Our annual meeting is in Toronto this year, and the province of Ontario is pulling out all the stops. It's going to be a great meeting. We've also got some seminars we've got going, one at the end of April on the labor issue in agricultural and rural areas. A lot of problems with getting people on farms, getting food production and all that, and it's going to be a regional-wide seminar in Baltimore, and if you're interested, let me know. The fall, we're going to do a program on housing, attainable, affordable housing, from a lot of different areas. And we've been started fortnightly roundtables on Zoom just to get to talk about issues that you're working on, including climate change, mental health, and others. We also have our Justice Center. I know that Senator Sears has been very instrumental. I want to say a couple words about that when your mouth is full. Swallow, but they work on justice reinvestment, behavioral health, second chance, reentry.
Obviously, I'm biased to the Justice Center. I've been a board member since the inception, way back 20 odd years ago. And I would estimate that the Justice Center's justice reinvestment and other programs have saved the state probably about 40 to 50 million a year on prison costs. But it also, we don't total up what people are, doing in the community rather than being in jail. We're making money, supporting families, paying taxes and so forth. So, and not committing crimes, by the way, which is important. So the work of the Justice Center is extremely important. We're meeting national, but I also want to mention that we're meeting in Toronto this summer, and what I like about CSG Easton is I've been from Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and all of the Canadian, Eastern Canadian provinces. And to understand what they're going through in their areas is really helpful. And we built good relationships. Unfortunately, many of those folks move on to, and the way the Canadian system works, they don't stay in office. If the majority changes.
I've also worked on border tours. We've taken the way that legislators.
Bunch of us gone on the borders.
And go to see the border from the US side and the Canadian side, and then on to Montreal for some briefings. And we did one in November, which was great. So this is the last time I was in Vermont. We're hosting coffee and pastries on Thursday morning in the cafeteria, so please come by. I will be there for not the whole time. I've got a flight to catch, but Vermont's one of our favorite states, as Senator Clarkson said.
You say that to all the states.
No, I don't. No, I've got one coming up that's not my favorite state. Maryland to Maine, Ontario to Nova Scotia, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. So I'll let you get on with your meeting. Thanks for everybody who is watching online. Thanks for being here. Catch me in the hallway. I'll probably be in the cafeteria as everyone is when you're not in meetings. So thanks very much.
Thank you for all you do for us.
And I will leave this with you until you get more later.
Okay, I have more information and we have more stuff to give to everybody.
All right. Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you, Dave. So first, thank you to Brian Campion. Senator Campion did the snacks today. Thank you very much, Senator Campion. And today we have a special treat. We're going to follow up on the request of Senator Sears to really dive in a little bit to the issues that surround the replacement of the women's correctional facility. And for those of us who have followed it for a long time, this has been it's been a thorny issue for quite a while. So we have the vice chair of Senate Institutions who's going to tee it up, Senator Harrison, and then we're going to go to two of the people who've been dealing with this the most in the House, Representative Boslan and Tristan Roberts, Representative Roberts. I got the Tristan part, but and they have dealt with this pretty fully and have passed this bill off to us for our consideration now in institutions.
Great. Thank you, Senator Clarkson. And I am new to this, so I appreciate the comments of Senator Sears. And I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. It's just a really complicated topic, as you know. The Institutions Committee is going to be responsible for reviewing and recommending a budget for the development of a few facilities, but the one that we're talking about the most is the Women's Correctional Facility, which I'm sure, especially those of you who have been here a long time, have heard about how troubled that facility is. As far as budget goes, the folks from the House will tell you more, but the short story is that the administration wanted 14 million next year, and they trimmed that to 13 million. Because it's such a long-term process that really doesn't have a big impact on what will be built. What will have an impact on what will be built, or if anything will be built, will be the research and the study that's going to happen between now and then. And I just want to talk a little bit about what I've learned about the philosophy of incarceration, or just the general areas. Restorative justice is huge, and Vermont made a switch to that model years ago, and it's very much appreciated by the residents of Vermont. Harm reduction is critical, and education, so that prisons aren't places to punish people, they're places to restore people and help people get the skills they need to live outside of the prison and to join the workforce. We have a workforce problem, and the prisons should be part of that. Just some things I've noticed: the existing conditions. The women's prison is horrendous. I have heard no one defend that prison, including the department, which is helpful. I've been to the Springfield prison twice. It's not anything close to restorative. It's punitive. It's really, it's not a good place to be for both the folks who live there and the folks who work there. Part of our challenge, and anyone propose anything different, is that we have detainees, and those are people who have been arrested but not convicted. So in other bigger states, they're held in county jails, which is a different situation than being held in a prison. And I hope that that's something that we can look at in this conversation. They used to be.
Can I just ask a question about the definition of detainee? I was recently speaking to a friend who was held there because they were arrested and weren't allowed to leave for 4 days. Is that a detainee?
I think that's a detainee. I think anyone except for the people who have been convicted is a detainee. I'm saying not from.
Bail or bail offenses. Most misdemeanors are not bail. You don't get held for bail. Honestly, you see held on bail. I mean, just did a bill. It's over in the house now on bail.
So they were like in a room with like 6 other people with one bathroom for 4 days without access to food that they could eat.
I really think every one of us who
It
have
was
not visited
shocking.
a prison should go and see it. Because there are places that we put people, and some of us don't want to know about it. But I really think everyone should go and
Maybe we could have a Senate tour after session.
That would be great. And Representative Moslin has been the one who's been organizing, but it's really, really helpful. And the employees appreciate it when we go too. They're very grateful. So speaking of field trips, I was able to go to the prisons in Maine, to the men's and the women's prison, and to the reentry facility. And I didn't really know what a reentry facility was until I went. And it's really, really important. And it's so critical that people have a good space where they can consciously learn what they need to know to re-enter, because they're dealing with a completely different world. And the world hasn't stood still when they've been away. Their family hasn't stood still. And it's also a place where they can retreat to in the evenings and make their reentry work better. It's really amazing. And the one in Maine, the people actually enjoy being there. They're grateful for it. The mood is positive, which is what the BGS folks told us in testimony. But it's really important to see it yourself. It's amazing. Turns out they're less expensive to build and operate, which is great. So it's a better system and less expensive. It's not necessarily what we need to do, but it's a really, really good system to see. And actually, that was the end of what I'm going to say, then to introduce them. So,
So ask that question.
yes.
So we have some closed/defunct institutions of higher learning around the state, and I'm wondering if you've ever looked at repurposing any of those structures to be comprehensive service facilities.
I'm not aware of that. Sounds
So that, I think that perhaps our two House members who are members of institutions and corrections will be able to answer some of that. Because we're going to talk about what is proposed at the moment, and I'm sure that's a piece of their conversation has been the opportunities we have for more space in the state, including some of our
So
closed.
go Wyndham County.
Yeah,
So Senator Lumbers.
I mean, not, oh gosh, sorry.
So, and I would just ask you both that we have people watching here and people listening here, so both places, the microphone and the camera. So.
Okay, thank you, senators. Thank you for having us. Brent from House Corrections and Institutions. Again, I'm Representative Roberts from Halifax, Representative Bosley from Westminster. A couple of things have come up already. We weren't going to talk about it today, but there is also in the capital bill that we passed out of our committee by 10-0-0 vote was passed out of the House, 2.5 million for booking expansion at Northwest Correctional Facility. That facility is currently in 8,000 to 10,000 people a year. Moving through it, and was designed for 600. So when you're talking about beds, that's a hot spot right now. But what I really wanted to talk about, and Senator Harrison asked us to cover, was policy provisions. So in section 23 of H 493, we have some policy language that goes into Title 29 as proposed, and this is to add that any design, construction, well, design, this is not design and planning, but for any maintenance, renovation, or construction to a state correctional facility, this is any project in the future, it uses evidence-based design principles for wellness environments incorporated in design planning. And that's a specific piece of wording that we really worked on that represents sort of what's understood in the field around humanizing the environments, making a harder facility that is really punitive to existing, for whether for the correctional officers or the incarcerated persons, and building a soft facility that better supports rehabilitation and reentry. With regards to, then we, in section 25 of H 493, we talked about specific design and for the replacement of the facility. That's key piece of that is that by January 2024, BGS is going to come with a site location proposal. And there's going to be monthly reports from September to December in advance of that recommendation from BGS. They are instructed to look at state-owned properties. They're going to be looking for 20 to 25 acres. As far as reusing an existing campus, that that could be on the table. I think we could ask them about that. This is the kind of facility that at the end of the day is probably going to be built from the ground up, new for the specific needs of the population. But they're certainly instructed to look statewide, and they also are instructed to look potentially co-locating facilities in one campus or having separate incarcerated and reentry facilities. There's a lot of discussion to head count, and that's a bit of a potato right now. We are asking BGS and DOC, well, excuse me, just this DOC in this case, for a written report by this November on the proposed size and scale of women's replacement facilities. And I think it's really important to keep in mind when you look at the population of the incarcerated persons in CRCF. There are many people with long-term sentences for very serious crimes, and it's really going to be a need for these secure facilities for the long term. And we have language in here that supports a vision for justice-involved individuals to re-enter the community through restorative justice, and also language in here that the design intent of the facility supports the use of evidence-based principles for wellness environments and trauma-informed practices. So again, basically humanizing, treating people like human beings, then support their rehabilitation and reentry to the community. This language is really specific, and there are deeper kind of policy issues and long-term thinking that we've also talked about as a committee in terms of conference and potential there.
Right. Yeah, so I just wanted to add on when Representative Roberts was talking about the gender-informed and trauma-informed spaces, like what does that mean? Basically, we've heard a lot of testimony from people who have come in and built prisons and other places who are working on trying to develop an environment that is most conducive to healing. And there's some really kind of simple things that we absolutely don't have in most of our facilities. And those include things like natural light, access to nature, some colors as opposed to walking into a space and having it look all gray and metal like you're in the inside of summer. So all of our facilities, for the most part, look like you would envision a prison from like 1950 looking like. They're all gray, they're metal, they don't have any natural light or very little. The windows are, so narrow that you might be able to stick your arm through it, but that's about it. So the environment is not conducive to healing. And for anybody who's there, even for a short time, that's not helpful. That's not helpful to your recovery. And in terms of the detainee issue is huge. In our prisons, like in the women's facility, for example, about 2 weeks ago, I was doing a presentation and I looked up some numbers. And that particular day, we had 60 women that were detainees, meaning people who had been charged but not sentenced. And the total population was 107. So more people were detained but not sentenced than people who were actually sentenced. And of those who were sentenced, actually only 10 of them were there for 7 years or longer. So the population that are going to be there for a long time is not huge. And then there's a range of people in between who are there for other purposes. But however long people are there, we want them to have an environment that is conducive to healing and recovery. And that includes having space for vocational programs, which we don't really have right now. We have a little bit, we don't have enough. One of the things that Senator Harris and I observed when we were in Maine was that they have really extensive spaces for art, for creating art, for doing different kinds of vocational training, for physical recreation. There's a whole variety of ways that people can unwind and engage while they're in that facility, whether they're incarcerated or whether they're in the reentry piece. And it's just a world of difference. Both the incarcerated and the reentry spaces in Maine are a very different model than what we have. And what our committee was unanimously in favor of is we want to support a replacement of the women's facility that includes an improvement, not an expansion as some people have called it, but an improvement. We want to have a section that is reentry facility where, as they have in Maine, people can take classes, they can work in the community, they can come and go, and it's not locked. So one of the reasons he said that it was, or maybe Senator Harrison said, it's less expensive. The reentry facility is not locked in the way that a prison is locked. It's a building somewhat like a dormitory, and you have to be there, and there's certain times that you need to check in, and there's policies you need to follow, but you can come and go in the community as you're building skills to make a successful transition. So our goal in the Corrections Committee is to try and help DOC and help the stakeholders who are working around the state to try and envision a replacement for our facility, to do that in the most humanitarian and also effective way possible. And that does include restorative justice practices and thinking about what has worked in other states. And one piece that I'm going to add, which actually isn't in the capital bill, but our committee is working on, is we actually have language that we want to add to one of your Senate bills coming our way, so it will come back to you, to formalize a working group to make advice around some specific aspects of the women's correctional facility. And so we've been working very closely with Sarah Robinson from the Vermont Network. We have a proposal that has updated language we're actually going to be reviewing today that includes a variety of stakeholders that would be part of this working group, that include the Vermont Network, the ACLU, Vermont Works for Women, at least 2 people who have lived experience who have been incarcerated, and a variety of other stakeholders from the community who will meet together at least 6 times a year and make advice and review and collect and give feedback around DOC's suggestions of what they're looking at in terms of next steps. And that'll include both, what do we do with detainees? Is there something more effective we could do than what we're doing right now, or should it be the same? You know, including, should we have a separate reentry and an incarcerative facility on the same campus? Or would it make sense, maybe we have a facility or a space or state land that we could use for one of those purposes, but it's not big enough to use for both. So at this point, our committee is not saying we know 100% what we want. We have a general idea what we want, and we need some more information. So the working group is going to help us get there. The DOC committee report is going to help us get there. But we know that to have a different physical space that has all the things that we want in terms of programming, it needs to be a different space than what we have right now. And it's going to cost more than $13 million, but this is a start. This is starting to fund the replacement, which we need.
Dave, Senator.
With all due respect, I appreciate the House members coming here. To continue to study this, we need to replace that facility 5 years ago. And we've been studying it and that. And I think everybody's agreed on what it should look like. I think we should get off the lot, so to speak, and do it. Frankly, you've got about 20 women, maybe 10 at sometimes 20, who are extremely violent, who need maximum security. And you have probably another 40 to 50 people who are sentenced, who could take advantage of all the things that you talked about in Maine. We already know that. And so I'm just speaking as one old man who started in the correctional system as a worker, understands the prison. I say it's time to build a new one, and we should be not studying anymore. So we already know that if we're going to build, we should build a new women's prison. If you want to solve the detention problem, you centrally build a facility just for detention. That's 400 people. You would stop the flow. The flow is causing innumerable problems for sentenced people. The more detainees you have in, the more people that the department has to send somewhere else, usually out of state or to another facility where there's some room. So the detention population is a real problem, and that's what we should be studying, is what type of facility we should have for the detention population.
That goes
That's
straight.
my opinion.
No, it's great, and it leads to the obvious question, which is, what is the time frame? Because I think many of us feel the way it does. We
We
should.
feel the same way. The study is gonna help to
Well, why are we
determine,
studying again?
it's gonna, go ahead. It's gonna determine the number of beds in the two spaces. How much do we need reentry? How much do we need incarcerated? We don't wanna overbuild. We also don't wanna underbuild. So that's why we're asking to put the money forward so that we can get the money in the pot so that we can start building. We can't start building until we have the plans, but they're working on those right now. In November, we'll get them back, and then in January, we can choose the model.
Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think that the studying should be on how we deal with the detention.
I think, yeah,
I can clarify that, the HOK has been working actively under contract for a couple of years. We got a report from them in January. There's nothing about H 493 that slows that down. We're continuing the ongoing process. We do not want to stop this in any way.
My
There's some
understanding is
kind of fact finding along the way to support the
it
design.
takes 5 years to build a new prison.
so is that our time frame? Is that we're looking to hopefully have
If you
whatever?
have the land already, then that can move things forward faster. If you have to buy land, you have to find a community willing to take it and go through all
Well, you
that.
have land at St. Albans.
We have a lot of land. We have
You have
course,
land
the
in
winter.
Windsor.
which is where they should never have left. Anyway, any other questions? Because we're gonna pivot in 1 minute, in 2 minutes rather.
Couple comments.
Martine, yeah, comments or questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I know many of you are aware of this, but I just feel I need to point out that we also have schools that don't have natural light, don't have fresh air, don't have color, have sewers backing up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just have to get that out there. Thank you.
You rock it there. And time.
I am
Quick
wondering,
stand up so we can all hear you and then.
so I'm wondering if in your committee conversation, you looked at the options of investing that money in secure substance use and mental health treatment as opposed to in prison.
We didn't have an alternative proposal, sort of not doing women's prison and instead doing that. That was not something the committee considered.
The working group is looking though at community-based services that could be included in either reentry or detainee residential options for folks. So that is still in the possible range of what could be included in the final model.
And did the committee take any kind of money on decarcerative efforts to actually move people out of prison who shouldn't be there in the first place?
Senator Sears been working on that for decades.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, we're doing, right this week, we're talking about medical furlough. We've been kind of consistent with working on that policy angle as well as moving forward to the county.
Yeah, I worry that, we are constantly faced with the contemplation of, well, we can't move people out of the prison system because we don't have the community supports, that it may make more sense to invest a lot of this money in those community supports that keep people out of prison. And that, if eliminating cash bail would open up enough beds that we in fact would not need to build a new prison and could close CRCF. So I want to make sure that we're really thinking about making the long-term investments in people who will help us with it.
I'm excited to see what you do in the gym.
Great, so thank you very much. This was really helpful and an issue that a lot of our caucus are very engaged and concerned with. We have two other issues we're going to take up right now. And Ginny has to leave, so we're going to do legislative compensation next, and we're going to first quickly do Senator Lyons on our
We'll look at the
H222
which is the a bill relating to opioid prevention,
reduce.
harm reduction. And this bill will be coming out of committee pretty soon, so that we'll all know much more about it. But simply to say that it does a number of things, including expansion of our needle and syringe disposal programs. It adds in opportunities for access to naloxone and opioid antagonists. It also it makes it easier for prescribers and healthcare folks to distribute things like buprenorphine and Suboxone and those things that are medicated treatment for opioid use disorder. So it's a very important bill. We are also adding in the recommendations from the Settlement Advisory Committee, $7.3 million, a little bit more than that, to enhance some of our opioid prevention, harm reduction programs in the state. And I'm not going to talk anymore because I have to leave, but it is a really very important bill. It is our bill related to opioid use disorder, and we're changing the name from medicated assisted treatment to medication for opioid use disorder. So overall, we'll expand access, hopefully reduce some stigma associated with someone seeking treatment for opioid use disorder, and really reinforcing the notion that this is a medical condition. It is not something that we should be sending directly into criminal justice or judiciary. So we are very close to passing the bill out. We'll be adding our amendment tomorrow, I think, or Thursday. We'll be finalizing. And so if you have questions about that bill, I would direct you to any member of the committee, Senator Gulick, Senator Hardy, especially since she served on the advisory committee for the prescription drug money that we received from the settlement.
Great, terrific, thank you, Senator.
You mentioned an amendment. My understanding is the funding is basically the recommendation that came out of the oversight. Yes. Your amendment does not affect any of the proposed spending. Our amendment will simply be adding on to the House bill what has come from the advisory committee, maybe some wordsmithing in the underlying bill that came to us from the House. But we're basically adhering to the advisory. I just wanted to confirm, this bill's still got to get through.
And given the importance,
it will get through appropriations.
Given the importance of reducing and preventing opioid addiction, abuse disorder, I would hope we would have a summary that we could all be working on.
As soon as it's done, we'll get it.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Senator Lyons, and Health and Welfare. I think we're going to pivot now to the update on legislative compensation. I think we have Senator Baru, Senator White, and Senator Hardy as resources to discuss what's happened in its journey through the Senate.
It's a magnificent journey through the Senate. Okay, hi everyone. Sorry to your last thing before we can
Remember,
leave.
you've got this crowd.
And hi behind you.
Come together.
Okay, so legislative pay, I've already presented S39 to you at one point. You're familiar with it. So where has it been and what is the information that you need to know now? So you have been handed a sheet of paper that is a one-pager on what S39 does, and it breaks down on the left-hand column our compensation reset and the benefits, and then on the right hand the reimbursements. If you remember your collective memory back when I presented on this before, The bill posits the introduction of health insurance options for folks in the General Assembly. It increases our weekly compensation to be connected to the average Vermont wage.
Not ours,
Not what?
not ours, next.
Yes, thank you. Good point. It doesn't go into effect. Well, I want to talk about the phase in on that in particular. So the weekly compensation will go for future legislators eventually from around $880 a week to around $1,200 a week, which is tied to the average Vermont salary. Senator Ruth will talk more about this, but the appropriations amendment phases that in over time. In the original bill, it started in 2025, so it wasn't actually affecting our compensation, but a future legislator's compensation. Additionally, we have off-session compensation in this bill, so you get 1 day off session per week as an option if you work on legislative or constituent service related things. On the right-hand side is the reimbursements. The top three were removed with the appropriations amendment, which they can speak more about. But the thing that remains is that new member stipend, so that legislative orientation is compensated as a per diem. When we did hear from many new legislators that the orientation was something that they struggled to be able to attend because they had to take unpaid time, especially when you're not yet elected. That is already a big ask. So that's really what I think you need to know about the bill. Process-wise, obviously it missed crossover, and I thank the Rules Committee who voted this morning to in fact have it go to its next iteration to let it come to the floor, and then hopefully when we pass it out of the Senate on a huge bipartisan, tripartisan vote, it will go to the House and we will be given the opportunity to have them review it as well. So I'm happy to take questions on the bill. And then
Why don't we have Phil present the approach amendment, and then we can take questions for both.
Yeah, sounds good. So just to pick up on that last point about timing, so we did vote, that is the Rules Committee voted the bill out of rules this morning. It's on notice and it'll come up Thursday, Friday. So that's when our action on it will occur. And if you look at this grid that I passed out to you, anything in yellow has been struck in the appropriations amendment. In general, what I would say is we found the Government Operations Committee's logic and argument about the big pieces very persuasive. So healthcare, getting compensation while we're in session up to that mean Vermont salary, and also for the first time really validating the work that we do in the off session with that 20% that you see on the left-hand side there. We found all those big pieces very persuasive, and I think most of our attention for that reason went to the small pieces, which in a certain way we assumed might be subsumed under the greater compensation. So things like the $30 an hour to prepare for a meeting, or a parking fee, something like that. We thought that those things could be thought to come under the umbrella of the increased compensation. The new member stipend, I personally think that's extremely important that we make it attractive for people to go to that, because it's in all of our interests that people come into the Senate with the same basic knowledge. And that's why that remains. The other thing that I would say is I did have discussions with everybody in the Senate about this bill, regardless of party. And I think that these changes reflect some of the concerns I heard and a lot of the appreciation that I heard for what the Government Operations Committee was doing. So without gauging anybody's vote, I think that there is strong support throughout the Senate for what remains here. And as you see at the top, it passed out of appropriations 7-0-0. That doesn't mean that all members of appropriations are committing to vote for it on the floor, but it had everybody's support to get out of committee.
Could you talk a little bit about the phase-in? Because that was one thing. So you may have seen the article that said Vermont legislature chooses the double salary.
Right.
And that article, I think, if you actually read the
full article, you had a different perspective on what we were talking about, because the doubling is only doubling because it's a very small number going to a slightly larger number. When you go from 13,000 to under 30,000, it can appear large. So I know you want to make sure that there wasn't a giant ramp up in that. So could you talk a little bit about the phase in?
So when I talked to people about their concerns, that came up somewhat, I won't say from everybody, but from a number of people. And so the thinking in appropriations was, could we have a slower ramp up to that ultimate compensation? So the way it stands now, the government operations, I think, was very smart to make it that we weren't adjusting our own compensation, we were adjusting the compensation of the next legislature. What this amendment does is it adjusts it over the next 2 legislatures. So in order for anyone in this room to get every benefit that's listed here, you would have to be reelected twice after this biennium. So it truly is a future legislature that's going to see that ultimate level of compensation. And yet, healthcare starts quickly, and we thought that was important. And some of the compensation comes in next biennium. It's half of what the Government Operations Committee envisioned. The other thing that I'll say is under leadership compensation, in the existing statute, the speaker and the pro tem have a compensation rate set the way that constitutional officers do. And in talking with the GovOps committee, the chair told me that inadvertently that differential had been impacted by the schedule that they had. So JFO brought that up to us. And so what you see in the appropriations amendment is restoring the existing differential, which also scales up over the same amount of time. So happy to take questions. Anything about the basic bill, I would direct to Senator White, and I'm happy to answer what we did in that.
Andy.
Senator White, you referenced the out of session as optional. Is it optional, or is it just once we're out of session, we can start getting the 1 day a week pay?
Yeah, so optional is that if you don't work that day, you don't need to get the salary.
Or that week.
Or that week.
But is it like an opt out or an opt in?
It is not an opt out.
It's an opt-in.
It's an opt.
If you have to fill it out like an expense form.
So my understanding is it's like, so we can talk to Jen Carvey, but we originally had talked through having it be certified that you were doing it and that you were actually, so I think you just.
Because that's different than what?
Yeah, so it does.
In the bill, and I talked to the pro tem about this, in the bill, the way it's drafted it is an automatic thing.
Yeah.
It's a stipend.
It is a stipend.
Yeah.
Everybody would get it automatically. You can say you don't want it, or, report to HR that you didn't work that week. So it's easier for them to have it as an automatic thing. Process it automatically. We did discuss in committee of having it an opt-in sort of certification thing. That's not how it eventually got drafted. I did bring it up in pro tem as something that the appropriations committee could consider, but I think from a mechanical perspective, that it's easier for HR. And if you don't want it, you can tell them, I didn't work, or I don't want to take it at all, or I want to donate it back, or whatever. And that's always an option.
And you can actually do that at any point. If you're a legislator who says that actually this salary increase is not something that I'd like to accept, I spoke to Mike Ferrant, and he has not had that situation come up often, but you are more than welcome to choose as a legislature to not accept the pay in some respects or to donate it. There's ways that you can do that. However, it's not something that they do frequently, so.
Yeah, during the recession, we had that option for those of us who prefer that. I
think I see
Tanya has her hand up.
Yes. With the appropriations amendment, removing the parking reimbursement for people with disabilities, are we worried that runs afoul of the ADA, asking people to pay to park because they have a disability?
I'm personally not worried about it. I don't think I don't think we're obligated. We're talking about the $12 over at the Capitol.
Right.
I don't think we're obligated under ADA to pay that. And again, the idea is that the compensation is being adjusted up somewhat dramatically. And so $12 in that context didn't seem didn't seem worth breaking out and creating a new obligation there, because we're, over the phase in, we are getting hundreds more dollars a week. So that was the thing.
I just worry that we're all getting that. If you have a disability and are incurring extra cost because of that disability, it makes me wonder if we are.
Well, my preferred route on that, and we've talked with House leadership about this, is to get into a more serious negotiation with the Capitol Plaza about moving that parking fee for legislators, because we're their best customer.
All right. Right. Any further questions, please ask Phil, Ruth, or Becca.
Can I make one point?
Yeah, yeah.
If you have specific questions that relate to like a health insurance situation where you're wondering, how would this bill affect me if I were to run for reelection and then run for reelection? Please come to me, because I prefer not to have those kinds of conversations on the floor, especially as they relate to healthcare, because we do have the breakdown of what state employees get, if that's a question. So, thanks.
Great. Thank you all. This was terrific. Very helpful. Thank you, Brian, again for staying here. And Justin, let's go off.